12 million ounces of gold tucked away safely in the ground in Canada. Today, we're joined by Dan Wilton. He's the CEO of First Mining Gold. We're going to talk to him about the gold mining sector in Canada, his company, and how right now, within the gold mining development sector, there are unbelievable value opportunities. Dan, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Ron, always a pleasure to be back in the basement. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's our pleasure to have you here. And Dan, when I look at the current market for gold development companies, it's not just your company, it's the whole sector has been pushed down to this point where what I see are just unbelievable value opportunities. I'll let you touch on that, please.
Oh, it's looking at it here. Obviously we focus a lot on First Mining Gold and kind of what's going on with our share price. It is unbelievable. And, I take very little comfort in the fact that it's not just us, but as you say, it really is across the sector. The sentiment that we're feeling now it feels kind of like a maximum capitulation sort of sentiment. I thought we were getting there in October, November of this past year, which again, another miserable time. And you saw literally from the beginning of 2023, sort of through that fall period, like a lot of developers, particularly down, 30, 40, 50%. And just when you think it can't get any lower, this continued downdraft has just been, and the downdraft in sentiment has just been insane for the value of the projects and the value of the resources that a lot of these development companies have. So I've been doing this for 30 years, and I will tell you, I've never seen a gap in valuations between advanced stage developers and gold producers like we have right now. Like just the number of real projects that you can buy today, invest today for less than $10 an ounce, and not like speculative out of the money research. I mean, like real advanced stage projects with economic studies on them. Never seen this before in my life. So, I think that just presents an unbelievable opportunity in terms of, a very, very attractive entry point into a number of these project developers.
Yeah. And you and I talked earlier, it's not like the demand for gold is going anywhere. I mean, to the contrary, we're seeing more gold demand year after year, including central banks and or many other sources. I want to throw in, you said this is the worst you've seen it in 30 years. It's the worst I've seen it in 20 years, which is how long I've been following it. I heard Ross Beatty last night say it's the worst he's seen it in 39 years. Everyone is saying that this does not make sense. And when I do some basic math with First Mining Gold, and I look at the market value of the company and divide it by 12, 13 million ounces of gold in the ground in Canada. Now, granted, right, this is all in the permitting process still, but there's been huge amounts of money spent developing those deposits, drilling, all types of work. I come to a number, is it less than $6 per ounce? Am I accurate when I say that?
Yeah, I think that's it. And as embarrassing as it is for me to say that as the CEO of the company, it's true. No, and that's, these are not wild speculative out of the money option ounces in places with no infrastructure where you don't know if you can ever turn them into a mine, right? Like, our project Duparquet is 3 past producing mines on the property. We've got an economic study we put out last year that shows, a project that can produce more than 200,000 ounces a year in the middle of probably the most sought after mining jurisdiction in the world. And you got Springpole, which is, advanced most of the way through its feasibility study, advanced in the permitting process that, we think there's, anyway, as I say, historically, typically, Ron, and I did this as an investment banker and, as a private equity investor for about 5 years, investment banker for 20, did a lot of valuations work, right? And that's, fundamental to my belief here is in real underlying fundamental value. And I can tell you, if you look back over over the last 30 years, historically, these companies tend to trade, with advanced stage projects at $50 to $100 an ounce. And that was at a much lower gold price, by the way.
Right.
And they tend to get bought by big producers in more buoyant M&A markets for $100 to $200 an ounce. So when you start thinking about what your return potential is, when your entry point is like this, at this, what I hope is a point of maximum capitulation, uh, it doesn't take a whole lot of math to tell you that, your return potential here is significant.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to reemphasize to our viewer, this is not an exploration stage company. This is not a company that says we want to raise $10 million because we want to go drill some land that's never been drilled before because we think there's some gold there. First Mining Gold, there has been hundreds of millions of dollars spent over the years by different operators from whom you acquired these projects, that they did that. They did the exploration. And
Yeah.
now, we know that the gold is there. Just out of curiosity, if you look across your entire portfolio, and I'll ask just for a rough estimate, how much money has been invested in these projects over the years and how that would relate to what the current market cap is?
Yeah, interestingly, it's well north of the book value that we have on our balance sheet, right? Because you got to remember when
Mm-hmm.
we acquired these projects, and First Mining acquired a lot of these projects in 2022 or in 2015, 2016, and Duparquet, we acquired again for a fraction of that value that was put into it.
Yeah.
In total, our estimates probably like the replacement value, if you had to do all of that work today, the replacement value of that work is probably between 300 and $400 million, right?
Wow.
On a market cap today where we're sitting at less than 100 Canadian. And that's just, the value of the drilling. You got to remember, Duparquet, 270,000 meters of drilling from 2008 to 2015. Like Springpole's got 180,000 meters of drilling into it. All the environmental work that's gone in, engineering work, metallurgical work, feasibility study work, permitting work, uh, all of that spend, it's amazing. Just again,
Yeah.
an amazing opportunity when you think about the fact that, you know, investors today can actually get access to all of that for a fraction of what it takes for any project today. Like if you were starting today with a great discovery, Ron, there's no way around spending that money, right? If it's
Mm-hmm.
going to become a
Yeah.
mine, you have to spend that money. And that's the other thing that I still find astounding, is that you talk to a lot of gold producers now who are starting to look at their pipelines for the back half of the decade. And they've, by and large, built everything they have in their own pipelines. They're all looking for projects to add because you just got to remember the average gold mine probably has a mine life of about 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even when most of them get built, they get built with a mine life of 10 years. So the reality is the average life's probably lower than that. Although you have some exceptional ones with large deposits that will, average it up. But let's just say it's 10 years. Well, there's no one has spent any money in developing projects like ours for a long period of time, right? Like, I will tell you, since 2011, 2012, it's been very difficult to raise the money to do the work that we've been doing. And we're not
Mm-hmm.
alone in that. That's the sector as a whole. So when you look at this realm of projects that's being constructed right now, like when those are done, there's not very many projects coming in behind it that have done the work, advanced in the technical study and the drilling and the feasibility work and the permitting work to really potentially be able to be in a position that you could build a mine, before 2030. In Canada, it's a small handful of those types of projects that exist. And we think we've got two of them, and two sizable ones inside First Mining, two of the 10 largest gold projects in development in Canada. So yeah, it's uh, you really believe in the quality of our asset base. We have a great team that's moving these projects forward, but it is just an irrational valuation in the market, which is in the end really just an opportunity for investors.
Yeah, and maybe that explains why Keith Neumeyer has been actively buying the stock, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. I want to share with our viewer, even if they need to rewind for the last 5 minutes of what you just said, what Dan was explaining is like chess. Or I know you're a Canadian, so you'll like it's like Wayne Gretzky says, I skate to where the puck's going to be. What Dan was explaining is the fact that, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, Dan, but I read recently that the major gold producers, that the level of reserves they have, their pipeline, right? Because every time they harvest an ounce of gold out of the ground, it's gone. It's a depletion business. That their pipeline, their reserve pipeline now is like 40% lower than it was 10 years ago, or maybe it was even 5 years ago. I mean, it's really true. These big mining companies don't have their pipeline is running dry. And I think you brought up just an excellent point that when they get to this position where they have to make a move, are they going to want to spend, $400-300 million going through all that work that a company like First Mining Gold has already done? If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell them that you're from Ron's Basement.
Well, and it's one thing to say, okay, well, we'll just go and do all that work themselves. But Ron, the biggest thing is the time frame, right?
Yeah.
Because
right.
if they start today and they're going full bore on it, it is in Canada, it's probably a 12 to 15 year process to produce gold. And by the way, if you have a mine life that is, or a reserve life that's 10 years, and you hope to be able to expand that with exploration near mines. A lot of them have been doing that, but less and less successfully. So you have to spend a lot more money on marginal increases to your reserve life. But the big step change ones, even if they want to get it, they can't just turn it on tonight. Even if they found it, they can't just turn it on tonight. This isn't oil and gas, right? And a lot of people who invest in energy and mining sometimes don't appreciate this distinction, but your time from discovery to cash flow in an oil well, if you're in an established region, can be like a year. Mm-hmm. Your time, because your discovery well becomes your production well. Your time frame from mining, from discovery to producing, is generally, on average in the world, 15 years right now. And that time frame is getting longer, not shorter. So that's where we talked about this forever. I said this 5 years ago when I joined as CEO. Like our strategy was to have these projects ready when the industry is going to need them the most, and often referenced the Wayne Gretzky quote that you've used there. But it's it's never been more clear to me that we have the intersection of a couple of inevitabilities. And one is that, I think you're going to see the gold price continue to go up. I think you're going to see supply constraints in the gold industry. You're going to continue to see that. And I think you have reserve lives that are coming down and companies that are going to need to replace those. And by the way, you look around the world with geopolitical situation like it is, there's not many places better than Ontario and Quebec in Canada that people are going to seek to put their capital.
Yeah. And you brought up a great point, Dan, because I was so focused on just the money component of what these, the big majors that, do we want to spend that money? Excuse me. But there's also the time component, like you said, right? Do we have, because the longer they wait to do something, the more critical the time component becomes for them. And I have one more for you, Dan. Whether they're just looking at time or money, the uncertainty as
Yeah.
well, right? I mean, because they don't. What are they going to buy? Go out and do some drilling. They don't know for sure if they're going to find anything. So it certainly feels like there's a confluence of factors coming together. And I'll use one more Rick Rule because it takes some patience. Definitely, as we've learned, takes patience. Rick Rule says, don't confuse that which is inevitable with that which is imminent, meaning sometimes it takes a little bit longer for these things to play out, as we can both attest.
Absolutely. I think back to 2019 when I started with the company and the gold price was around $1,300.
Yeah.
And Ron, I'm sure somewhere if you scour the internet, you'll find me giving some interview saying, you know what, listen, if you think the gold price is going up, and it will, like a $2,000 gold, we're not going to need to worry about anything in this industry. Developers are
Yeah.
going to be, through the roof, and gold companies are going to be making so much money that they're all going to come and buy the next generation of projects. And I think, the gold price hasn't delivered well, let's take a step back. The gold price has delivered everything that it needs to fundamentally, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we cannot complain about the gold price in this industry. It's healthy. Gold producers are and should be generating, good levels of free cash flow. It's just we're at this point where again that investor sentiment has not caught up with it. But what that gold price also gives us, and if you believe in a bit of a higher gold price that we were talking about a bit earlier, um, the projects like we have, these large scale projects, people need to remember just the leverage that those projects give you to the gold price, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's with an advanced stage project where you've done, an economic study on it, you can really quantify that. So for Spring Pole, every $100 in the gold price is 150 million US dollars of after-tax net present value, $250 million of pre-tax net present value. At Duparquet, it's about 100 million US, like 130 Canadian, for every $100 on the gold price. So, we think we have $2 billion worth of asset value just from the studies that we've published, but that's Spring Pole at $1,600 gold and Duparquet at $1,800 gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
actually believe in a $2,500 gold price, and sitting at 2050, the reality is, Rob, it doesn't take much of a push. We could be at
No.
2,300 in 3 trading days if it really got constructive here. That's where, I think people really have an opportunity with a company like First Mining is the increment for every incremental $100 on the gold price. It's like more than 3 times our current market cap in
Yeah.
incremental leverage. And
Yeah.
so that's where, when we think about kind of what the opportunity, where you could see the share price go, it's not crazy when you look at historical valuation metrics. You look at, the underlying value of the assets that we have, and you look at a positive gold price environment. It really is a period of exceptional potential share price appreciation here, and a lot of it driven by investors' opportunity to get in at the values where the great capitulation seems to have pushed developers like us.
Yeah, and it's not, I guess, the silver lining, pardon the pun, in all this is it's not going to take it. We don't need a massive change. We would welcome a massive change in sentiment, but even the slightest of improvement in sentiment could have a major impact. I mean, it's been the sector has been, I think, unjustly punished and ignored for so long, resulting in these just ridiculously low valuations. And I will defend you some, Dan. I know you are responsible for First Mining Gold, but it is the whole sector as well, that if we get just the slightest improvement, and we saw that back in October, you and I were together when I visited the Duparquet project, and right about that same time, maybe we need to go on another trip, because shortly thereafter, there was an improvement. And from, maybe with that early October, it kind of ended right around Christmas. And as we've gone into the new year, what seemed like could never get worse, it had the overall sentiment has gotten worse. The HUI index, the gold bugs index, if you compare a ratio of that to the gold price, it's like 0.1. And it's like at historic lows. And I would
Yeah,
imagine it may have set a record in the last few days.
yeah,
And if that gets back to its, I have a chart laying around here somewhere. Those are the 16 biggest gold producers, right? And
yeah,
like you said, the disconnect becomes even more extreme as you go from the big guys down to the mid-tier producers, down to the developers. We're really in a situation that everyone I hear from, including you, is like, I've never seen it this bad in my life. But like you said, it's insane because the demand for gold is robust,
yeah,
and it's projected to continue to be robust. So it really is presenting an opportunity for people. Look, none of us, we aren't giving financial advice. We don't have a crystal ball, but it just seems like a great asymmetric investment opportunity where, yeah, is there downside? You're darn right, because
yeah,
honestly, I would have sat here and said the same thing a year ago. I would have put my mom and dad's money in, my parents' money, my kids' money into this sector a year ago
yeah,
because I thought, and it's gotten worse. But at some point, it does have to give, because we aren't talking about buggy whips here. We're talking about gold.
yeah,
Gold is not going extinct. Silver is
yeah.
not going extinct. So sorry, you're the CEO. I work for you. I went on a bit of a rant there, but it really, I just think, is a period where we've seen valuations get to a point where it's just absolutely ridiculous. I want to point this out because it's important to me. It's important to a lot of investors. Keith Neumeyer is the chairman of the company. He has been buying millions of shares, it feels like, from what I'm following, over the last 6 months. You have been with the company for 5 years. I know you started out your tenure there by putting a big chunk of your own money into the company, and the most recent financing. Give me an idea of how you perceive your skin in the game. I know you don't want to talk for Keith, but
Well, I can, Keith's, it's all very public, right? Because we're all
mm-hmm.
insiders, so we have to file. Keith's bought, uh, in in the last financing, Keith bought about 10 million shares. I bought about 4 million shares. Um, there was about $500,000 that I spent in this last financing. It's the third check of that size that I've written. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Ron, for me, I'm not Keith Neumeyer. I don't have Keith's financial resources, but people need to remember that almost every share that he has in this company, he's bought either in
Yeah.
financings or in the open market. Um, and since that financing, he's bought another 1.5 million shares, right? And he so was with him this past week, and he kind of looked at this share price where we are and said, "Well, looks like I was gonna, you know, buy some more in the first week of March, but looks like I might need to buy it, in the last couple of days of February." So
Right.
he's got a real commitment to continuing to see that increase, and I think investors can see that Keith's in the market almost every month buying stock. It's significant amount. He was, again, the amount he put in was like 1.25 million. So in total, management and directors were $2 million of our last almost $11 million financing.
Yeah.
So we're very committed. I mean, on top of that, you have a lot of the management taking the vast majority of their short-term incentive plan bonus compensation in shares and restricted share units. And, I took all of mine in shares this year, um, just because this is the time. A, you got to be responsible and keep your cash in the company. But B, this is a time when I want to get my hands on as much of this equity exposure as I can,
Yeah.
because I know what the assets are. I know we've got a great team. I know
Yeah.
what the time frames are to move these things forward. And, I know that we have the backing of our shareholders and of our board and our large shareholders like Keith that will get us to the finish line on a couple of these really important projects that we're working on. So, I see this just said it's a crazy market.
Yeah, yeah,
The craziest I've seen in 30 years in terms of the disconnect on value. But that's the time when real fortunes are made, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
being able to look at the bigger picture and understand that these are assets that have real fundamental value and billions of dollars of real fundamental value that you can buy today at pennies on the dollar. And so I'm quite happy to continue to do that. And I know the rest of our board and our key shareholders are happy to continue to do that. And this is, I just think, a great opportunity for a lot of our long-term investors. And Ron, obviously, you're a long-term investor, and
yeah.
you said earlier you work for me, and I think you've got that entirely backwards, Ron. I work for you, right? You're a shareholder,
That's
and
right.
the management is responsible to the shareholders of this company, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So I think it's a great time to
Yeah.
knowing how I think the industry and the sector is going to work out over the next 2 or 3 years. It's just an unbelievable opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to quickly touch on the team as well, because I did have the opportunity to meet with a few of them. You have a what I would call a top tier team. Just a couple of the people. I mean, these are high quality, accomplished people in the mining sector. Steve Lines was instrumental in getting the what is now the Greenstone mine that Equinox is
Yep.
building.
Yep.
And several other big mines in Canada, both on the company side, and I believe you worked on the regulation. He's a top tier professional. James Maxwell came from Sabina Gold, as I remember,
Yep. That's right.
was their VP of exploration, or VP of exploration with First Mining. But
Yep.
he was instrumental in helping develop their gold resources in the ground. They were recently acquired, or in the last year or so acquired. And I mean, these guys are, and I met them in person. These are top notch professionals. This team that you've been able to assemble.
No, absolutely. And the teams that those two on the technical side have been able to bring together,
Yeah.
we're absolutely blessed. And remember that those key folks are all very incentivized and aligned with the shareholders too, right? Like
Hmm.
everyone has a lot of share exposure here through shares that we bought, shares that
Right.
we're taking as our compensation. We're, as a team and as individuals, very, very aligned with the shareholders. So, and both those guys are huge fans of yours too, Ron. So, that's I think that needs to be said too. No, we're lucky to have been able to attract and retain great people, but they're not here to try and just see the share price move, right? They're here because
Hmm.
they have a real understanding of the fundamental value of the assets that we have and a path forward. So yeah, at some point, I think we'll get a number of other members of our team, and I think it'd be great just you and them have 10, 15
Yeah.
minutes to make sure that the other people, your followers and subscribers are able to kind of get a little bit better acquainted with some of the rest of the depth of team that we have here at First Mining.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think the next event that I'll do, I'll get Steve Lines and James Maxwell on, just to kind of talk with them to get their
Yeah, for
views
sure.
on things. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Dan. Thank you, Dan. I want to mention to our viewer and say thank you on behalf of our viewer for taking the time to share the information about the company and the gold market. If people want to learn more about First Mining Gold, they go to firstmininggold.com. The stock is traded in Canada with the symbol FF, and in the US, FFMGF. And if people have questions, is there anybody at the company, Dan, that they can reach out to ask questions or say hello to?
Well, naturally, the first line is usually into Paul Morris, our director of investor relations, and I think it's Paul at firstmininggold.com.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, Paul is obviously very, very well attuned with the story, and can get anyone any information that they might need.
That's right. We like to say, call Paul, right?
Call
If you have
Paul.
questions, call Paul. Well, Dan, we'll look forward to seeing how this market plays out in the coming years. I think when things get back to somewhat of a normal situation, we could be in for some really great times within the precious metals mining sector. And we'll look forward to watching you and watching the company. And thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Ron. Thanks for having me, and we'll chat again soon.
Okay, thanks, Dan.